I'm here to make you laugh. I'm here to amuse you. I may or may not have on big shoes. This is Funny Like Clown Podcast, and I'm your host, Dennis Wirth, coming out of Gardner. G Vegas, baby, little town outside of Boston, episode 60, May 3rd, 2020. As always, Funny Like Clown Podcast is brought to you by G Vegas Buffalo Sauce. You want some spicy, you want some sweet, you want some savory taste in your mouth? There's only one G Vegas available at www.gvegas.webs.com. Go hit up that website, check it out. Homemade, you're supporting local, shipped to your door. You don't have to go to the grocery store where it's dangerous to do. We discuss comedians, man, and this guy, going way back there, I mean, we got somewhat memories of him, but if you asked our parents, he'd go into the big time stage. Jackie Mason, who's still around today. Ranked number 63 on Comedy Central's 100 greatest all-time stand-up comedians, and just to be on that list, I mean, if you consider how many comedians there are to be in the top 100, that's saying something right there, man. That means he gave us a lot. He gave us so much to laugh about in life. He was famous for his one-man shows. 1986, The World According to Me, won a Tony Award, a Outer Critics Award, Ace Award, an Emmy Award, and a Grammy nomination. So, you got that many awards flowing in, you're doing something right there. His 1988 special, Jackie Mason on Broadway, won an Emmy and an Ace, and, you know, you pay your dues, I remember, who was it? Don't tell me. George Lucas of Star Wars. He said that he's never won any big time awards because he's too big for the industry. He's too big to receive awards like that. He said, and sometimes you get nominated for littler ones and he don't show up because they're little. He pick and chooses, if he does win an award, who you show up for the big ones. But you don't insult the industry. You got to pay your dues. I mean, the Grammys, those are the tops of the tops if you win a Grammy. But, the Grammy Awards, they won't even think about having you on unless you show up and pay your dues to the Emmys and all the other smaller ones, You have to pay your dues first and show you're appreciative, and you have to massage the industry, as they would say, okay? So, if you're nominated, you show up even for the little ones because that'll lead you to the big ones, okay? That's how it goes. The people that don't show up and, if you hit it out of the park like George Lucas did, then, you're too big to get nominated for a Grammy because you're above the industry at that point. Nobody likes the industry being above them. They want you to massage them, okay? Again, and then, man, this name pops up all the time on Finally Clown Podcast. 1991, he did some voiceover work for The Simpsons, which I think, man, they were big into having comedians on that show, I'll tell you. He was nominated for his third Emmy for that role. Episode was called Like Father, Like Clown. So, what the perfect title for Funny Like Clown Podcast, Like Father, Like Clown on The Simpsons. So, hats off to The Simpsons for giving back to comedy like that, I mean, having so many comedians on. Everybody can add that one to their resume because all the top comics, And I'll give it to The Simpsons. A lot of them they put on, before they were even, like, as big as we know them now. So, they saw the future, they saw the writing, and that's cool. He's written and performed 6 one-man shows on Broadway, and just to make it on Broadway, there's a cool thing for you right there, I mean, there's nothing like Broadway, man. That's the top of the top live shows in New York City, and they got off Broadway and on Broadway. If you're off Broadway, you're small, and if you're on Broadway, you're big time. And I remember listening to Debbie Gibson once, and I think she's on the Howard Stern show, and he said, you're not as popular was he in the 80s, And she said, well, may the downfall of everyone's career be starring on Broadway. He's like, don't get defensive. Okay. So, hey, man, you're on Broadway, you're still at the top of your game, okay? And I remember Mark Hamill after Star Wars. He did Star Wars. After that, he always dreamed of doing Broadway. He could have went on and done some major films like Harrison Ford did, but he followed his dream. He wanted to do Broadway, and he went down there. He owned Broadway for a while there, and that's what happens when you're part of a movie franchise that's big. You get to do what you want. You get to pick and choose what you want to do, and that's always cool. Let's see, he was known for his delivery, his voice, and his use of puns, and he was also known as politically incorrect, which, that gets you remembered if you're... Back then it did, nowadays everybody's insulted, I'm offended if you're politically incorrect, back then if you're politically incorrect, it'd get you remembered, okay? So, there's a difference between standing up and having your point heard and standing up and looking like an idiot, okay? There's a fine line you draw there, and you don't want to draw over that line. He had a thick Jewish accent, which he was remembered for his voice and thick Jewish accent, and someone actually suggested he went to speech therapy classes and tried to clean it up a little bit. He's like, nope, that was his shtick, and he was sticking with it. It's Time Magazine said he once spoke to audiences, which I mean, comedy, it's a great way to get your point across. You know what I'm saying? It's like if you bitch and complain, nobody wants to listen to your bullshit. But if you put a few jokes in there and you make them laugh, then they're willing to listen to your point of view. I mean, I do my comedy routine. I do the character, the child support superhero. And if I bitch about child support, nobody wants to listen to it. But if I put a few jokes in there, make a character, the child support superhero, and I make you laugh about it, okay, now you're willing to listen to my point of view about child support system, which is messed up, mind you, and killing children committing suicide, but I try not to get into it too much. Check it out, man, child support superhero on Facebook. I try not to get into it too much on the podcast, because I'm so passionate, I do the whole podcast about it, and we're here to talk about comedy. Let's see, as a teenager, he worked as a busboy in New York in the Catskill Mountains, and, that name, the Catskill Mountains, man, that's turned up more than once. I guess, that's where you go to start all the, resort lodges out there. If you can't get on the mainstream, you gotta start somewhere, and that's where you go to these resorts, okay, because they're looking for people to entertain their crowds. 20 minutes as a busboy, he said he broke all the dishes in the place, so they ended up making him a lifeguard, but he couldn't swim, so I don't know how you're a lifeguard, he can't even swim, and he's like, guess he told his boss, well, just don't tell the guests I can't swim, okay? But, I mean, that's how you become a comedian, okay? When in your real life you're trying to make any situation funny, that's the making of a good comedian right there. That means you like to joke around, I mean, when you're at work, and you're making all the other employees laugh, that's what prepares you to become a comedian, is being the class clown, being the funny guy right there. At age 25, he became a rabbi, following a long family line going all the way back to his great-grandfather. During his sermons, he started to tell more and more jokes, and people came just to hear them. They didn't want to hear the sermon; they just wanted to hear his jokes. And that was when he realized, he had a niche for making people laugh. After his father died, he stopped being a rabbi and pursued stand-up comedy full time. And when you're in a situation like that, if you're at work or something, and somebody's making fun of you. When it happens, you got to think quick, okay? You got to come back with a comeback quick, okay? And it teaches you how to think quick. Because when you're on stage, somebody throws a heckle at you, you got 1 second to throw something smart back, and you're going to look like the idiot, So it's like, I mean, it teaches you how to think quick in comedy when you're in situations like that. I imagine he felt an obligation to become a rabbi, where, I mean, if it's going all the way, your father, your father's father, your father's father's father, your father's 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 father, if it goes back, you have some obligation. Hey, I got to follow on the family line, and I got to become a rabbi too, so I'm sure he did that. Where, I remember my father, he was into horses, he liked to race horses, and it was like he always wanted that to be my dream, and it's like, well, your dream can't be my dream. He always tried to force me to work with the horses because he loved it so much, and I ended up hating him for it because, it was his dream, not mine, but he got upset if I wouldn't follow in his dream, so, hats off to him. He paid due to his parents, but I mean, your life is your life. It can't be somebody else's to run, you know what I'm saying? So he performed at a hotel in New York. He was fired for ridiculing the audience, which, I mean, they said it was before his time, because after he got fired from that, a few years later along came Don Rickles, and he was insulting everybody, and it became an accepted style then. But I mean, before Don Rickles, it wasn't accepted, to be an insult comic wasn't a thing you did. People are going out to have a fun time, and you're sitting there insulting them. They're getting upset, but Don Rickles was able to do it in such a comedic way where people wouldn't get upset if you insulted them. They'd find it funny. So you had to find a fine line how to laugh at yourself while you were laughing at somebody else. He performed in New York City nightclubs after Don Rickles, made that an accepted thing. He started a resurgence. He was earning as much as $10,000 a week, and back then that was a lot of money. It equals out in today's money to $82,000 a week. You're making $82,000 a week. You are at the top of your game, okay? You know what happens when you're at the top of your game? He got his first TV appearance on the Steve Allen Show in 1962. That was followed by, you heard any of these shows? The Tonight Show with Steve Allen, the Perry Como Show, the Dean Martin Show, the Gary Moore Show, the Ed Sullivan Show, okay? These were the biggest shows of the time, The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, I remember from our time, but before Johnny Carson, it was Steve Allen who hosted that show. And Ed Sullivan, I mean, he was the Johnny Carson before Johnny Carson. You get on that show, that was the top of the top right there. 1962, he released an LP on the greatest comedian in the world, only nobody knows it yet. That's a catchy title right there. Okay, how do you not buy that album if you see it sitting in the record store? Yes, they had record stores. We actually had to go buy records. Everything was online like it is nowadays. But I miss the old LPs and the cassette tapes. You got the artwork. You got the way it was supposed to be listened to, each joke in order, which, that's important too, because if you put an album together, one joke leads into another, and if you listen to them out of order, you're ruining the whole meaning of the, if you download, all the jokes, but they're not in order, you're missing the meaning of the album right there. So we've lost a lot, with downloading and free file sharing and stuff. We've lost so much from a world long forgotten, where you got the artwork, you got them in, the order it was meant to listen to, and I guess people are willing to give that up if it's free, okay? Because everybody's looking for the free ride. Not many people want to work for a living and actually buy stuff anymore. So if they can get it for free, why purchase it, I guess? We're all guilty of that, I guess, who isn't? Let's see. That was followed up by another LP called I Want to Leave You with the Words of a Great Comedian. And, these are some great selling albums for him. When Ed Sullivan gave him a shot on the show, he actually gave Ed Sullivan the finger on air. He flipped him the bird on air. And I guess what happened was Ed Sullivan went behind a camera, and he gave him the 2-minute signal, which if you ever done TV, they'll give you the signal, this is how much time you have left. And he thought he had more time, but the reason Ed Sullivan was giving the signal early, he was telling him, you need to wrap it up early because the president's going to cut in on the show and we're going to get cut out. But when Ed Sullivan put the fingers up, he thought he was flipping Jackie the bird. You're going to give me the bird? Hey, right back. I'll give you the bird right back. And there was a misunderstanding. And Ed Sullivan was so outraged by this that he did it, that he banned Jackie Mason from the show. And he had signed a contract already for like 6 appearances. I think he was only a second, so he had 4 appearances that he didn't even get to do because he was banned from the show. It went to court. It was a big thing. He sued for Ed Sullivan ruining his image. He said, once that hit the news media that he gave Ed Sullivan the bird, nobody wanted to go see him, and it really ruined his image. There was a big lawsuit. It got dropped by one court, then another court chose, not that he was right, but they had the right for the Supreme Court to hear it, or whatever, the next level court to hear it, so it was reinstated. Never came out what the ruling was, but 20 years later, which I imagine this had to be part of a settlement. We never heard about the settlement, but, stuff like this happened. 20 years later, he was given a comeback episode on the Ed Sullivan Show, and Ed Sullivan apologized to him. So I imagine that was part of the settlement, hey, you don't want to give me money, you better, help me get my career back, put me on your show, and you need to apologize that you were wrong. And that was probably all right to settle the case. Ed probably agreed to that. So, but, the damage was already done at that point, that, even after he did the comeback special, it was tough to, when you're at the top of your game, nobody rides the top forever, man. And it's like, once you're off that top, it's tough to make a comeback. Elvis did it, but few can make a comeback to where you're back at the top of your game after you fall from that pedestal. But, I mean, Andrew Dice Clay, when he was on MTV, he started telling dirty jokes, okay? He got banned for life from MTV, but being banned for life from MTV gained him more popularity than if he had a good clean set, So sometimes, flipping the bird to Ed Sullivan might get you remembered more than if you had a good comedy set, So all depends on how you look at it, but I guess ticket sales are the bottom line. If people coming out to see you, then it's good. If they're not, then it hurts you. So that's his profession, This is how he makes money. And like he's got a day job. I mean, that's all he does is comedy. You ruin that, how's the guy making money, So those are damages, and you're entitled to compensation for your damages. 1965 to 85, he did the Broadway theater. He did things like Teaspoon Every 4 Hours. And, I did a short film, and I do plan on doing some mainstream films, but you don't jump in and do mainstream films. Like I said, you got to pay your dues, You start out, you do acting, little roles, little cameo roles, little short films, then you work your way up, and then you do some mainstream films. He did that, doing some Broadway theater. He worked his way up. He got a role in the movie The Jerk. Now, this is more where people our generation will somewhat remember, because as a kid, we all watched The Jerk with our parents. That was with Steve Martin. You're working with Steve Martin, okay? He's in the top 5. He's in the icon category right there, Steve Martin, Top 5 godfathers of comedy of our time. You're in a movie with that guy, and The Jerk was the biggest hit of the time. #1 movie at the time. So he was in that. He was in A History of the World Part 1. That was a Mel Brooks movie. So, I mean, here's this guy. He's worked his way up. He's working with Steve Martin and Mel Brooks. That's the top of your game right there. So, well, his live shows, maybe he was hurt by the Ed Sullivan Show. He was still moving on to the next stage of his career, which was doing movies, and that'll launch you back into the big time. So good for him. 1986, he had a 2-year run. The World According to Me on Broadway, which he did 367 shows the first year and 203 the second year, and I believe that was a record at the time that nobody had done that many shows. May still be to this day, I don't know, but I mean, you're doing that many shows on Broadway, that means people are coming out to see you, which is tough because they tell entertainers, if you do a show, say, in Boston, okay, well, you can't play Boston again, and the people who came out to see you, they're not going to come out unless you're a huge act, the next night, you got to give a little bit of time to make them want to see you again, so, it's like getting residency in Vegas. I mean, yeah, it's a big honor to get residency in Vegas. You're performing every single night of the week. You work 6 nights a week and get one night off, okay? So it's like, you can't just tell the same material over and over 6 nights a week. You got to constantly come up with new material. That's why they have writers, because nobody could possibly come up with that new material, You got to improvise a lot, You got to do some crowd work, and not everybody can do crowd work. So as big of an honor it is, it's challenging also. I remember I went out to see Carl LeBove, and he had residency out in Vegas, and, he was talking about how difficult it is. Every night you got to come up with a new act, and that's a heck of a lot of material, man. It's not easy to do. So, well, it is an honor. It's also a challenge. This led to where I remember him best for. And 1988, he had a lead role in Caddyshack 2, which, it was kind of a bad deal because I guess he was in Caddyshack 1, which was the all-time classic, and nothing could ever live up to Caddyshack 1, There's few franchises. I mean, you could do, off the top of my head, maybe Star Wars and Back to the Future, where the second film was as good as the first one. I mean, yeah, the first one was so good you made a second one, but it's so difficult to live up to the magic of the first one. I mean, he was set up, to fail in that, where Caddyshack 2, where I still thought it was a decent movie. A lot of people at the time, they hated it, but they didn't hate it because it was a bad movie. They hated it because it couldn't live up to Caddyshack 1, I mean, had they released it as a different movie, have nothing to do with Caddyshack, it might have did better, but if you were going to compare it to the first one, it couldn't live up to it. But I still thought it was a decent movie where a lot of people hated it. But that's where I remember him the best for. He really anchored down that movie. I remember Randy Quaid, I loved his role in that, it was kind of crazy. And little did I know, that was actually a role that was offered to my hero, Sam Kinison, right behind me here, and he turned it down. That was where Randy Quaid got it, but I thought it was hysterical. They wrote the role for Sam, but he had some great lines in that. Remember saying, problem with golf is that it's a sport for pussies, man. Okay, I cracked up when I heard that right there. It's like, no contact, man. All right. Here's what they should do. I try to get the ball in the hole, and you defend the hole. Got your club swinging around, couple upper body checks. You got yourself a game. I don't know. Those are classic lines I remember from the movie. Then when Jackie Mason was sitting there and. Well, the kid was playing the lifeguard at the country club, and he was checking out his daughter, and he's like, oh, you probably want to get her in a room and have a little fun with her, right? He's like, yeah, you ain't kidding. Hey, you're the lifeguard. Every single life out here is your responsibility. You understand that? You repeat after every single, don't confuse me. Every single life out here is your responsibility. So I did. I cracked up at the movie, and I used to get in an argument with a guy at work. He couldn't stand the movie, and I thought it was good, and we got into some classic arguments over whether it was a good movie or not, but watch it for yourself if you haven't seen it. Don't try to compare it to Caddyshack 1. Just watch it on its own. He had a short-lived television sitcom called Chicken Soup, and it's so tough to make it on TV. I remember on Dallas there, J.R. Ewing, and they killed off his brother there. Patrick Duffy played his brother, and he thought he'd go on to do bigger things because Dallas was such a mainstream show, and he went on to do not much of nothing, and Larry Hagman was laughing at him like, you don't realize how hard it is to get a number one show on TV, do you? And they eventually wrote his character back into the show, but, it's not easy to be on the number one show, man, if you do appreciate it. That's why these bands drive me nuts, They work so hard to get there, they hit mainstream, then they break up because they can't handle the pressure of being in the big time, and everybody's got a different idea of what's fair, what's not, what you should be doing, what's not, and egos clash, man. Same thing in comedy. You're dealing with egos, and you want to get booked, you better massage egos. We've talked about it before. You don't insult the guy ahead of you in the game, even if you're right. Even if you're right, keep your mouth shut, let your comedy do the talking for you. That's how you handle that one. After that, he went on to do some films. One Angry Man in 2010. Jackie Goldberg, Private Dick in 2011. And he's also had a couple of books out there. Jackie Mason's America, Jackie Oi, How to Talk Jewish, and Schmucks. So I've never been in the book thing. I've only read a few books in my life. I guess not much interests me. I mean, I just assume watch a movie on it. Some people are into the reading thing, and you do. I mean, you get more information out of a book than you'll ever get out of watching things. It's either your thing or it's not. Remember, I read Sam Kinnison's book. I couldn't put the thing down. It interested me. Then I tried to read some other books, and I'd be thinking about other stuff while I was reading. So, but check out his books if you want to read them. Now he's actually, this is the day and age everything's going to. We've talked about it before. Everything's going to Netflix. Everything's going to YouTube. He's got a video blog on YouTube, and he's experimenting with some podcasting, doing some. So he's blogging on YouTube. But Jackie Mason, for a guy of his age, he's realizing, I said it before, I brought a buddy to my town, and there was a pizza shop on every corner. He's like, dude, why is there so many pizza shops? Like, because that's what people's buying. They're buying pizza. That's why, why is everybody going on the internet? Because that's where everybody's at, man. That's why they're going to the internet. So it's almost at a point where the internet's, it is. Netflix is paying millions of dollars to get people over there where you couldn't make that much, putting it out of the box office if you tried. So everything's going to the internet, downloading. It's the future, and that's why you can't even release a comedy CD anymore. You can't release a comedy album because you got to give it to them for free. It's a promotional item, and hope you can make up for it. Where they like you enough by getting your stuff for free that they'll come out to see you live, and you make up your money there at the live shows. Which I was watching a big interview with Paul Stanley at Kiss, and he was saying, why should my art form? Why should I have to compromise and give it to you for free? It's illegal to download it, but everybody's doing it anyway. Why should I have to give you something for free? Because that's the day and age we live in. That's why you got to do it. Maybe it's not right, wrong, or otherwise. That's what's happening, and you got to go with the flow. That's why. So he has a perfect argument. No, it's not right. He shouldn't have to do it. But hey, we all do things we don't want to do in life. It's a free country, but we still have laws to live by. Let's see. Now I'm going to debunk one here because when I was getting ready to do this show, I actually had a lot of people comment, and they said that, man, I loved him so good when he was in the Anteater on the Pink Panther there, man. Okay, this is where the Anteater, he'd go around trying to eat the ant, and it was the voice of Jackie Mason, and everybody loved him for that role. Well, come to find out, it wasn't Jackie Mason who did it. It was actually an impressionist, John Biner, and he did an impression of Jackie Mason, and I guess his impression was so good everybody thought it was Jackie Mason because everybody was saying they loved him for that role as the Anteater, and it wasn't even him. So I guess the guy that just John Biner was an impressionist. He was the Craig Gass or the Rich Little or Frank Caliendo of his time. He did such a good Jackie Mason voice, he convinced everybody it was actually him doing it. He chose. He did the voices of both the Anteater and the ant on the cartoon, so he was doing both voices, where the Anteater went around trying to eat the ant, trying to figure out different ways to eat the ant. And I remember, I'm an Anteater, I'm supposed to eat ants. But he did the voice of the Aardvark, which is the Anteater. He did an impression of Jackie Mason, and he said that the ant was actually an impression he did of Dean Martin. So Dean Martin didn't play the ant, and Jackie Mason didn't play the Aardvark. It was just John Biner doing impressions. So we've ended that rumor right there. I did get a couple of fans that wrote in, and they said a couple of cool stories that, one of them, Stephanie Peters wrote in. She met him once, and, I guess she was going to meet him or whatever, and she took the wrong highway, and she's not into sports, and I think she said she took the Jackie Robinson freeway or whatever, and she thought it was Jackie Mason, and he's like, really? That's why you're late? Because you misunderstood the highway? You thought it was me? Or whatever. Somebody else said they got an autograph, and, he was very accommodating, which some people are cool with the fans. Some people forget where they came from. I always said, if you make it big, don't forget where you came from. Can't stand that people look down on people. One said that I think his wife was going through some health issues, and he mentioned it to his dentist or something, and the dentist was actually friends with Jackie Mason's wife. So she set it up to have Jackie Mason call his wife that was going through health issues, and when Jackie Mason calls you, yeah, you're Jackie Mason, funny, and hung up on the guy. Never realized that it was actually Jackie Mason. Then I guess his wife called back and straightened the whole thing out that, yeah, it actually was him. He called to talk to your wife and help her through the health issues. So those are cool stories you hear, when somebody's willing to do that, man, it shows, you didn't forget where you came from. Don't forget where you came from. Keep laughing. This is Funny Like Clown Podcast, man. And some great comedians out there. We're learning stuff on this podcast, A lot of the comics, I grew up with these comics. I watched them, but no matter how many times I do a podcast, I always learn something about these comics I didn't know, Today I learned that first I thought he was the voice of the Aardvark. Come to find out he wasn't. I remember I found out Jonathan Winters was the voice of Papa Smurf, and I watched the Smurfs as a kid. I had no idea Jonathan Winters was the voice, and it all made sense after I heard him. Like, yeah, that was his voice. Well, why didn't I ever realize that? But hey, we're having fun, man. I hope you're having fun with me. We're learning things about the comics we all grew up and love. Laughter is the best medicine. Keep tuning in. Till next week. Hey, go out, tell somebody a joke, and make them smile, because the world needs more smile right now because we're going through a tough time. And if even for one second, you tell somebody a joke, go to work, call up somebody right now, tell them a joke, put some laughter in life. Laughter is the best medicine. We'll see you next week. Good night.